This is the second video of the first part of an introduction to Judaism. The first part dealing with the nature of traditional Judaism as a religion. Traditional Judaism based on the Hebrew Bible and the Talmud. So I want to begin by summarizing the main point from the first video. The main point that I made in the first video is that Judaism and Christianity are religions in a very, very different sense. Christianity is a religion in an orthodox sense. Orthodox being a Latin term that literally means correct belief. And such a term is very compatible with a Christian conception of religion, because Christianity is a religion in the sense of a faith commitment. Faith not just in God, but in Jesus as the Messiah or Savior. Therefore, there can be no such thing in principle as a secular, non-believing Christian who doesn't believe in Jesus as the Messiah. By contrast, if we are insisting upon using Latin terms for some reason, why this is so, I don't understand, but if we are insisting upon using Latin terms to talk about Judaism, then the nature of Judaism as a religion is not orthodox, correct belief. It's orthoprax, correct practice, correct deeds, because Judaism is a religion not in the sense of a faith commitment. Judaism is a religion in the sense of a way of life, a culture of a people. And we, the Jewish people, are a people in a nationalistic sense, not in a racial or an ethnic sense. From the very beginning of Jewish history, we have had Jews of differing racial and ethnic backgrounds. And anyone can convert and become a member of the Jewish people, no matter racial or ethnic background. So that Judaism is a religion in the sense of a way of life of a people, and therefore, in principle, there can be such a thing as a secular Jew. Indeed, we can have a secular Jew who may not believe in God at all, may not be observant of a traditional life of law and ritual practice, and yet this secular Jew is a loyal member of the Jewish people, having been born of a Jewish mother or having converted, and this secular Jew is loyal to his or her people and to his or her heritage and culture. So, that's the main point that I made in the first video. Now, in this second video, I want to elaborate much more in depth regarding these two basic elements of Judaism as a religion, that Judaism is a way of life of a people. Each of these two elements have roots going way back to the Bible, two religious covenants between God and the Jewish people, according to the biblical account. These are the covenants of Abraham and Moses. The covenant of Abraham is the nationalistic aspect of Judaism as a religion. The covenant of Moses is the aspect of Judaism being a way of life of the Jewish people. Okay, so I'll start with the covenant of Abraham. Abraham is the spiritual father of the Jewish people. The covenant of Abraham includes two elements. The first element is peoplehood, nationhood, that we're a people, a nation. The second element is that as a people we're to inherit the land of Israel as our national homeland according to the biblical account. Now there's a connection between these two elements because the name given in the Bible, given by God, according to the biblical account, the name given by God to the Jewish people is the name Israel, the very same name of the land that we're to inherit as our homeland. So the name Israel, then, especially as the name of the Jewish people, is very, very significant. In Hebrew, the name Israel, Yisrael, and if you divide it in the middle, it's actually two separate Hebrew words, Yashar El. Yashar means righteous, El, God. So literally, the name of the Jewish people, Israel, means righteous of God. So reflected in our name is an orthoprax conception of religion, of what Judaism is about as a religion, that we are to be a people devoted to a life of righteousness, right living. The conception reflected in our name is not orthodox, correct belief. The essence of Judaism is not a faith commitment. The essence of Judaism is that we are to be a people devoted to a life of righteousness and right living. If I were to choose one verse from the Bible that captures the essence of religion in the biblical conception more than any other verse, I would choose the verse from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verse 18, and you shall do that which is right and good in the eyes of the Lord. And the word right here is actually the word righteous, the same word that appears in the name Israel. So that the verse actually says, and you shall do that which is righteous and good in the eyes of the Lord. So the verse is again reflecting an orthoprax conception that the essence of religion is a life of righteousness, goodness, right living, morality, above and beyond law. And this is clear from the context, in the plain meaning of the passage, because if you look in verse 17, the previous verse, the verse speaks about observance of commandments in a legal sense. And then verse 18 says, and you shall do that which is righteous and good in the eyes of the Lord. So that the verse, and you shall do that which is righteous and good in the eyes of the Lord, is speaking about a life of righteousness, goodness, morality, above and beyond a life of law and commandments. Now, if we go back to Abraham, the father, spiritual father of the Jewish people, Abraham is singled out in the biblical account, singled out by God. You look in the book of Genesis, chapter 18, verse 19, Abraham was singled out there by God as a person who will keep the way of the Lord. To keep the way of the Lord means we're speaking about the essence of religion, the essence of Judaism as a religion. Abraham is singled out as a person who will keep the way of the Lord. What does that mean? The verse continues and tells us to do righteousness and justice. Notice the orthoprax emphasis, to do, just as in the verse from the book of Deuteronomy. And you shall do that which is right and good in the eyes of the Lord. The emphasis here is not an orthodox emphasis on correct belief. The emphasis is an orthoprax emphasis on correct deeds. You shall do that which is right and good in the eyes of the Lord. Abraham is a person who will keep the way of the Lord to do righteousness and justice. The word righteous here in the verse regarding Abraham is not the same word contained in the name Israel. It's a synonym. But the point here is that the essence of Judaism as a religion, reflected in our very name Israel, is that we are to be a people devoted to a life of righteousness, right living, and morality. And Abraham, as the spiritual father of the Jewish people, is a person who is singled out by God in the biblical account as exemplifying such a life of righteousness and right living and morality. Okay, so that's the covenant of Abraham. Now, to the covenant of Moses. According to the Jewish tradition, Moses received the Torah, in the sense of the 5 books of Moses, on Mount Sinai. Now, nowhere is that written in the biblical account that Moses received Torah in the sense of the 5 books of Moses, that Moses received the 5 books of Moses on Mount Sinai. That's not written anywhere in the Bible. What is written in the biblical account is that on Mount Sinai, the Jewish people received 2 things. Number 1, the Jewish people received the 10 statements. The term 10 commandments is a misnomer, a mistranslation. The biblical term is 10 statements, and the Talmudic rabbis used a similar term meaning 10 statements. The 10 statements include various commandments, but the term is 10 statements. And the 10 statements were received by the entire Jewish people, not just by Moses. The entire Jewish people, in the plain meaning of the biblical account, received the 10 statements. The second thing that the Jewish people received was through the mediation of Moses, and that is many additional commandments beyond those contained in the 10 statements. That's what was received on Mount Sinai according to the biblical account. But to go back, according to tradition, Moses received Torah on Mount Sinai. Now, Torah is the central term in the Jewish tradition. And it's the literal meaning of the term is instruction, guidance. Now, we have a number of different usages in the Jewish tradition based on all of these usages are based on the literal meaning, instruction, guidance. So in a very specific sense, Torah can mean law. And it has this meaning in a number of biblical passages. And law is a form of guidance, legal guidance. More broadly, the term Torah can mean the 5 books of Moses. And the 5 books of Moses are instruction, guidance, not only legal guidance, also guidance of a moral and spiritual nature. In an even more broad sense, in an even broader sense, the term Torah can mean Judaism. And Judaism, there is no term Judaism in the Bible and no term Judaism in the Talmudic literature. When the Talmudic rabbis speak of Judaism, they use this central term Torah. Torah means Judaism. We're speaking of the Jewish rabbinic tradition, the foundation of which is the Talmud, the Jewish rabbinic tradition based on the Bible. That's Judaism. When the Talmudic rabbis speak of Judaism, they speak of Torah, the rabbinic tradition based on the Bible. Okay? And Judaism then is, of course, instruction, guidance of how to live, of how to live not just in terms of legal guidance, but also, again, moral and spiritual guidance. And then in the broadest sense, Torah can mean wisdom of a universal nature, which is also guidance. So these are the various usages of the term Torah. Now I want to go back to the literal meaning of the term Torah, instruction, guidance, and to elaborate here, because we actually have two aspects of Torah, instruction, guidance, according to our tradition. Two aspects, an external aspect and an internal aspect. Okay, so the external aspect is the law. And the rabbinic term for law is halakha, which is a term that means to go, to walk. The law is you can say, the path upon which a traditional Jew walks, goes. Now, the term halakha, to walk, to go, implies something external, because walking, going is an activity of a human being. An external activity, behavior of a human being to walk, to go, that flows from something internal. It flows from our values, ideals, ideas. We have values, ideas of where we want to go, how we want to get there. But the activity of walking and going is external behavior. Okay, so the law is, as implied in the term halakha, is the external aspect of Torah, Judaism. Okay, and the law then is an external system of authority that tells us, you do this, you don't do that. This is permissible, this is forbidden. We don't decide for ourselves law of what's permissible and forbidden. The external system of law determines for us. You do this, you don't do that. This is permissible, this is forbidden. Now, parenthetically, Christianity, what we refer to as the Christian polemic, ideological attack upon Judaism through the ages, especially in the Middle Ages, as a part of this Christian ideological attack upon Judaism, Christianity portrayed Judaism as a religion of law, and Christianity as a religion in a spiritual sense. This is a complete misconception with regard to Judaism as a religion. The law is only one aspect of Torah, of guidance in the Jewish tradition. The law is the external aspect. We also have an internal spiritual aspect that I'll come to momentarily. Just one last thing regarding the law. There's an additional rabbinic term for law that the Talmudic rabbis use, and that is gufei Torah, which literally means bodies of the Torah. And notice here also, reflected in the term bodies of the Torah, is implied that the law is external. It's the bodily aspect of Torah, Judaism. The spiritual aspect, the soul of Judaism, is the second kind of guidance that we have in our tradition, the internal aspect, which we call agadah. And agadah is from a term that means story, because a story is a source of values, ideals, and ideas. Law deals with permissible and forbidden. A story, values, ideals deals with true and false, right and wrong, good and bad. And this is a matter of internal autonomy. We decide for ourselves what we accept as true and false, right and wrong, good and bad. Okay, so this is the internal spiritual aspect of Judaism. Now, by way of conclusion to this video, I want to add 2 points, okay, that are connected. In doing so, I want to go back to the first video, this fundamental difference between Judaism and Christianity. That Christianity is a religion in an orthodox sense of a faith commitment, and there can be no faith in Jesus as the Messiah, and there can be no such thing as a secular Christian. By contrast, Judaism is a religion in the sense of a way of life of a people. And there can be such a notion as a secular Jew who may not believe in God, may not live a traditional Jewish life of law and ritual practice, but is a loyal member of the Jewish people, having been born of a Jewish mother, having converted, and this secular Jew is loyal to his or her people and to his or her heritage and culture. Okay? What I want to add now, the first point that I want to add, is that in the biblical conception of religion, reflected in the very name of the Jewish people, that we are to be a people devoted to a life of righteousness, right living, morality. Okay? If this secular Jew who doesn't believe in God and doesn't live a traditional life of law and ritual practice, but this secular Jew lives a life of righteousness and morality, this person is fulfilling the very essence of what it means to be a Jew, the essence of Judaism as a religion. And paradoxically, even though this secular Jew defines himself or herself as secular and not religious, nevertheless, in the biblical conception of religion, reflected in our very name Israel, means that this person, even though he or she doesn't define himself or herself as religious, this person is a truly religious person and fulfilling the very essence of religion, a life of righteousness and morality. Conversely, we can have a person, a Jew, who defines himself or herself as religious, and this Jew who defines himself or herself as religious believes in God and lives a life, a traditional Jewish life of law and ritual practice. But if this person lives an immoral life, this person is not truly a religious person. And I'll go even further. The term secular in Hebrew comes from a word that means desecration. And in the biblical conception, there can be no greater desecration than the name of God, no greater desecration of religion in the biblical conception than a life of immorality. So that actually this person who defines himself or herself as religious, but lives an immoral life, this is a desecration, and this is a truly secular person. Okay, that's the first point. The second point, by way of conclusion, Hillel and Rabbi Akiva are the two greatest Talmudic rabbis in our tradition. And Hillel and Rabbi Akiva, when they speak of the essence of Judaism, they don't have a term Judaism again, they speak of Torah. The essence of Torah is moral decency. Hillel formulated as the essence of Judaism, the essence of Torah, the moral principle, what is hateful unto you, do not do unto others. And Rabbi Akiva pointed to the verse as the essence of Judaism, Torah, the verse from the Bible in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 18, love your neighbor as yourself. So that both speak of moral decency. However, as the essence of Judaism, Torah. However, shockingly, and people don't pay attention to how shocking their formulations are, but shockingly, they omit God from their formulation. The formulations are entirely secular. So notice, on the one hand, they're faithful to the biblical conception in that the essence of religion for Hillel and Rabbi Akiva's morality, as in the biblical conception. On the one hand, they're faithful to the biblical conception. On the other hand, they're not faithful to the biblical conception, because in the biblical conception, the morality as the essence of religion is presented as reflecting the will of God. And you shall do that which is right and good in the eyes of the Lord. And Abraham is singled out as a person who will keep the way of the Lord to do righteousness and justice. So Hillel and Rabbi Akiva omit God. Okay? And notice that Rabbi Akiva even cuts off the continuation of the verse that he cites as the essence of Judaism. Love your neighbor as yourself. The continuation of the verse is, I am the Lord. Rabbi Akiva cuts it off. Hillel doesn't even quote a biblical verse. He simply formulates a moral principle on the basis of our own conscience, our own conscience, our own experience. What is hateful unto you, do not do unto others. Why? Why do they omit God from their formulation? So I want to suggest that the main reason, may not be the only reason, but the main reason that they omit God from their formulations is that Hillel and Rabbi Akiva are devoted to a fundamental spiritual idea of the Jewish tradition. Notice a spiritual idea in the realm of Agadah, the spiritual side of Judaism. But this spiritual idea or ideal has an external legal aspect. Okay? So what is this fundamental spiritual idea? That the Jewish people is to be one nation, indivisible. And the external legal aspect is that there's an ancient Talmudic law that we are forbidden to divide the Jewish people into ideological factions. Now, in my mind, we violate this ancient Talmudic law in two senses. Number one, in our use of ideological labels, religious and secular. And these are ideological labels that divide the Jewish people into ideological factions. And the clear implication is that the religious are the good guys and the secular are the bad guys, or at least problematic. Okay? And of course, in using these labels, we're speaking of Jews who believe in God, are observant of a traditional Jewish life, and are seen as the religious, the good guys, and Jews who are not observant of a traditional Jewish life of law and ritual practice and may not believe in God. These are the bad guys, or at least problematic. This ideological distinction is a clear violation, in my mind, of this ancient Talmudic law that we're forbidden to divide the Jewish people into ideological factions. And, in fact, there are no such ideological labels, religious, secular, not in the Bible and not in the Talmudic literature. Now, the second way that we violate this ancient Talmudic law that we're forbidden to divide the Jewish people into ideological factions is in the rise of ideological movements that we see in the Jewish world today across the spectrum from secular to ultra-Orthodox. Secular humanist Judaism, Reform Judaism, Reconstructionist Judaism, Conservative Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, ultra-Orthodox Judaism. These ideological movements are a violation of this law that we're forbidden to divide the Jewish people into ideological factions. Parenthetically, my use of the term orthoprax is not as an ideological label. I do not intend in any way to create a new ideological movement or to use the term in an ideological sense. My use of the term is simply as a teacher of Jewish studies to describe the nature of the Jewish tradition. That the nature of the Jewish tradition, the nature of Judaism as a religion, if we again insist on using Latin terms, is not orthodox, correct belief, it's orthoprax, correct practice, correct deeds. That's a description. Okay? Now to go back to Hillel and Rabbi Akiva, why do they omit God then? Because Hillel and Rabbi Akiva are devoted to, committed to this fundamental spiritual idea that the Jewish people is one people and not to be divided. And therefore, in their secular formulations, they are seeking points of agreement between Jews of differing ideological backgrounds. They're seeking to bridge gaps between Jews of differing ideological backgrounds rather than to create divisiveness and division. So if Hillel and Rabbi Akiva were to speak about faith in God as the essence of Judaism and religion, that would divide the Jewish people. Jews who believe in God, Jews who don't believe in God. And among those who believe in God, there would be divisiveness. Many differing conceptions of the term God and the term faith. If Hillel and Rabbi Akiva were to speak of a traditional Jewish life of law and ritual practice as the essence of Judaism and religion, that would create divisiveness. Jews who are observant of a traditional Jewish life, Jews who are not observant of a traditional Jewish life. And among those who are observant of a traditional Jewish life, divisiveness. Many, many differing conceptions and approaches to a traditional Jewish life of law and ritual practice. So that there is one thing, from a religious point of view, that can unite us as a people, above and beyond our common culture, heritage of the Jewish people. Above and beyond our common culture and heritage, what can unite us from a religious point of view is that Judaism demands moral decency. This is what stands behind the formulations of Hillel and Rabbi Akiva in my view. Everyone across the spectrum, from secular to ultra-Orthodox, the spectrum of the Jewish people, from secular to ultra-Orthodox, everyone can agree, there will be no disagreement, that Judaism as a religion demands a life of morality, of righteousness, right living and morality. No disagreement whatsoever. We may have disagreement over specific moral issues, but that Judaism demands a life of righteousness, right living, morality, moral decency, no one will disagree with. So this then is the reason that Hillel and Rabbi Akiva omit God from their formulations, that their formulations are entirely secular, because they are committed and devoted to the unity of the Jewish people.